morning, Councilman. Bong Wan Kim, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. As you know, the council had approved the Neighborhood Purposes Grant Program, and this is to update you on the progress that the department is making in administering the program. Just to remind you, eligible organizations are nonprofit 501c3 organizations as well as public schools. We have been conducting a series of regional town halls and been getting feedback from neighborhood councils on how best to structure the program so that we maintain a balance between transparency, flexibility and ease of use. There's a conflict of interest enforcement that we implemented into the program. We also put in a fiscal performance standard so that any neighborhood council...
Could you give me a quick rundown where this item came from?
This is the Neighborhood Purposes Grant Program. This allows neighborhood councils to make grants to nonprofit organizations and public schools.
I understand that, but I'm just trying to figure out, there's no council file here. This came directly from the department?
In terms of this agenda item?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Can somebody explain that?
I just assumed it was a status report.
There's no council file number because there's no new written report, so it's a discussion item only. And I believe the department was requested to give an update on the status of the program.
And you said if there was a written report, there would be a council file?
Correct.
Okay, and that, excuse me for the education here, but I'm still not getting why we're doing a report.
When we were doing the agenda, we asked what items they could report on, and the department said that they wanted to report on this item as an update.
Oh, so this is your request?
An update.
Oh, okay.
Daryl Powell, CLA's office. I'll try to update us. Originally, the city council did approve the establishment of this program, and when it came to council, they made a few amendments to it, and and then the recommendation also asked for, I believe, the city attorney to draft an ordinance to implement the program. And so at this point, they're just simply giving us, I guess, an update of where we are with the implementation of the program.
Okay.
There is a council file for this item.
Yeah, that's why I'm a little confused here, why there is no council file.
Because it's a discussion item. But you could have put that council file number on there, but the city clerk would have to speak to that.
Yeah, I'm really not understanding this.
The item has been approved by council. Council has acted, and therefore the city clerk views that council file as closed at this point until a new report is submitted.
Need
to
an
open.
ordinance.
The ordinance has been adopted.
The ordinance was adopted?
It was.
Yes, Gwen Pointer, City Attorney's Office. Yeah, the City Attorney has completed the project. The ordinance is adopted. The plan has been amended, and the program is now in the implementation phase. So apparently, the department wanted to advise the council what's going on with it.
Okay. Thank you.
Shall I continue?
I'm all ears.
So we will be mailing out and sending packets to the neighborhood councils announcing the program and the guidelines. Basically, the packet, which I have a copy of, you can review it for your reference, consists of an application form, a board approval process. We were asking for a board resolution stating the public purpose and the community benefit. We would also require an IRS determination letter verifying that the entity receiving the grant is a nonprofit organization. We also included in there a grant application form.
How much of this is required by the ordinance? Like all of it?
No. These are guidelines that we put in so that we would make sure that the program was administered with as much public integrity as possible. The grant ranges this was in the ordinance, is up to $5,000. And then anything over $5,000 would require a contract. And since neighborhood councils are prohibited from entering into their own contracts, the department would assist them. Grants over $20,000 would have to be approved by the general manager and the Board of Neighborhood Commissioners.
Okay, essentially, so the ordinance just said it's okay to give grants at various levels, but it doesn't describe the process.
No.
Has this been vetted by the neighborhood council system?
Yes.
In what way?
We included this as one of the items in our regional town halls. So we rolled out our draft proposal of the way the program would be structured and received a lot of good feedback from neighborhood councils.
Okay.
We'll be doing our last regional town hall in the central area this Saturday, and then after that, we'll just wrap up all the feedback and then announce the program in March.
Okay, so just tell me, what's a simple explanation for what, if a neighborhood council wants to give a grant, what do they have to do?
What do they have to do?
Yeah, what happens?
They would put the grant application,
So, let's say a local nonprofit comes to them and makes a request to them for $2,500. Then what happens?
They would be asked to submit a grant application form that would explain to them what the purpose of the grant is and the fact that they are a legal entity.
That's this one?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the board would review that application and decide on its merits at that point. Our suggestions are that the grants be as much as possible.
For my constituents?
Yes,
Because,
that's citywide.
no, I'm talking about my district stuff.
Mhm.
Because we get requests all the time, but we don't really have a form.
Oh,
I mean, if we're telling the neighborhood councils they should have a form, it seems to me the council officers should have a form too.
sure.
And this is primarily for documentation purposes. It's not
Correct.
really, it doesn't really, you're not going to review this and say acceptable or not. It's up to the neighborhood council to make that decision.
That's correct.
Okay. Is there any circumstance where you would not approve something? Or do you approve it at all?
No, as long as they meet the guidelines and the stipulations, mainly having to do with it being a legal nonprofit entity.
Okay. Now, if it's over 5,000, what's the difference?
Over $5,000, that was the threshold, I believe, was established by ordinance.
What happens then?
And then we would have to go into contract for anything over $5,000. So essentially, we're discouraging neighborhood councils to give grants over $5,000.
I don't know why we care. I mean, if they want to give all their money to one organization, what do we care? I don't understand. What was the policy consideration behind that?
If the city attorney could remind us of the
Already passed it.
ordinance. $5,000 was the threshold, wasn't it?
Maybe Mr. King, who drafted the ordinance, can assist, but I believe it was the threshold wherein a letter agreement would be required, just because now you're dealing with
We're not
larger
disallowing it.
sums.
We're just saying if you go to that level, you have a higher standard.
Yeah, and because it's a contract, and we wanted to be able to enforce that contract. This is modeled after the City Council's GCP program, which says there's no requirement for a writing for you as a council member to grant money, but once you go over 5,000, then we formalize it with a written agreement. And
Okay.
so it's modeled after that.
Okay. I thought that was an outstanding report. We don't have any public comments, so unless we hear major complaints once you implement the program, I'm fine.
Mhm.
We'll move forward and see what happens.
Very good.
All right?
Thank you.
And I want to hurry before the other committee get here. Item number 2.
Item number 2 is a department report relative to the neighborhood council equipment purchases.
Bong Kim, Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. The committee had requested that we report back in 30 days on our current inventory tracking system. And to give you background, neighborhood councils are allowed to purchase equipment through one of three ways. One is through a credit card with a limit of $1,000 per transaction. They could also issue a demand warrant. And the third way would be through a city purchase order. According to our data, roughly 25% of the 89 neighborhood councils actually purchase items which qualify as inventory items. There are two categories of equipment and furniture that we track. One is for anything over $5,000, and then the second category is electric or electronic or communications equipment over $1,000. Our procedures internally for tracking inventory is
Why do we
this-
not track something less than that?
The guidelines established by the controller require us to follow the $5,000.
No, I'm saying less than 1,000.
Well, one has to do with feasibility, implementability, because the tracking of inventory does involve quite a bit of work.
Why? I mean, the city purchasing agent tracks calculators.
Mhm.
Even if somebody has one nowadays, they still have a tag on it. I mean, why can't we do that in this system? It seems to me you can amass a lot of items with $1,000.
Well, we felt that
You could buy a copier for less than $1,000. We should track
yes,
it.
you could.
But why don't we?
Current policy and guidelines have.
Who made that policy and where are those? Who developed those guidelines?
The controller in the administrative code had set out the dollar threshold.
The administrative code sets out $1,000
No, $5,000
for,
for equipment purchases that we have to keep track of.
are we prohibited from keeping track of other items less than that?
As far as I know, we're not prohibited from it. But it's mainly, again, an issue of time, both for the department as well as neighborhood councils.
Okay, I don't buy that. I'm sorry. But I don't think these neighborhood councils have that much equipment. How many
Well-
items of equipment do they have?
Right.
10? So we're talking about 900 items?
It's, well, like I said, about 25% of neighborhood councils have equipment and purchases that would qualify under the $5,000 and $1,000 standard. I don't know what it would look like under $1,000 because we haven't been tracking it that way. But if it is the council's desire to start tracking items under $1,000 on a going forward basis, we'd have to change our procedures.
I'm just concerned that
Mhm.
you think we can't track that stuff.
I didn't say we couldn't. It's just our existing policy in the past.
No,
But
you
if
said it was an issue of feasibility and its implementability.
it does involve a lot more work.
Why does it involve a lot more work? I mean, all they have to do is list their equipment, and then once a year, somebody goes out and checks it
Right.
and verifies it. You don't even have to you can do a sampling. You don't even have to do the whole thing. But why is it such a challenge?
Not all neighborhood councils have office space. About 49 neighborhood councils have office
If
space.
the president has a laptop at their home,
Right.
you should be able to track it, so that the next president can get the laptop.
Mhm.
But if you don't even track it, we're pretty much guaranteed to lose that item.
Well, items over laptop would qualify under
If it's under
the
1,000.
tracking, not if it's under 1,000.
I think laptops are, I've had 2 stolen,
Mhm.
so that seems to me something that should be tracked. I don't understand what's the threshold at the purchasing department?
I don't know.
Does anybody know?
What was the question?
What is the threshold, what is the threshold of items that are tracked by the purchasing department? I know it's a lot less than 1,000. I thought it was something, a long time ago, it was $50.
Yeah. Well, departments are held under closer scrutiny.
It's much more complicated, too.
Yes, it is.
But the departments do the work. I used to do the work for the
Mhm.
personnel department.
Mhm.
So I don't understand why we can't track this stuff. Look, the practicality of it is that in a small operation, somebody will have access to equipment.
Mhm.
And what happens when that elected official moves on, if there's no tracking, nobody will know where that equipment was,
That's correct.
and it'll just sit there in somebody's garage.
That's correct.
So I don't
And that's
understand
why
why
we
we
do
don't
the-
want to track it.
Yeah. And that is the purpose for the procedures that we're following now, because there is a lot of transition and turnover amongst board members.
Well, what happens is it creates angst in the neighborhood councils.
Mhm.
Somebody's going to be angry because somebody ripped off the electric pencil sharpener.
Mhm.
Or somebody's going to be mad because the, I don't know, the slide projector is gone. And these are things that I think are easy enough to track.
If the council's instructions are to do that on a going forward basis,
Right
we'll
now, you
adjust our
have receipts
procedures.
for these items, right?
Yes, we have a paper trail for all purchases.
Okay, so if there's a paper trail, so you have a paper trail,
Hmm?
but you don't have an inventory process.
Yes, for anything under 1,000.
So if somebody complains about a missing laptop
Mhm.
that wasn't on the tracking system, do they get it back?
Yes, if we felt that
But
a
how
board
do you-
member had absconded with the equipment purchased
But,
with
but
public
how do you
funds,
know
we
where
would go
it
after
is?
them.
How do you know where it is?
We would have to inquire.
I mean, they just say, "But no, they haven't."
Yeah.
You know,
We'd have to go after it. Since we have the proof
well,
that they had
nobody- I don't
purchased
know
it.
what exactly you mean by absconded. But
Well,
if it's not tracked, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure how you define that. But
Can I ask a question?
I just think $1,000 is way too high.
Mhm.
Way too high. What do you think? I was just gonna ask, equipment and furniture occurs in 3 ways, according to this report. Through a credit card with a limit of $1,000,
Mhm.
through issuance of a city check, and through issuance of a city purchase order.
That's correct.
How, do we know how are most items purchased? What are they mostly doing?
It's mostly through the prior two, credit card and demand warrants. The purchase order would be when they are purchasing equipment for city departments. That doesn't happen as often.
So most of the stuff they're doing is through their credit card?
Credit card and demand warrants, which
And
is
so-
city check. Yes.
Which is more? Which do they do more?
I don't have that data with me. I'd have to get back to you on it.
Right. But, and those items we're tracking.
Yes. Well, we have a paper trail, but the inventory that we maintain is the thresholds are anything over $1,000.
I question that.
Mm-hmm.
Who owns this equipment?
The city does.
But who? Which department?
Our department.
Then aren't you under the same mandates under the purchasing agent than all the other departments?
I believe we would be.
So why do you have a different standard than all the other departments?
Well, perhaps we need to start,
Perhaps.
maybe we
I
need
think you're
to
in violation
change
of
our
the code.
guidelines.
The purchasing agent sets the standards for what needs to be tracked.
Mhm.
And it may be the ad code, I don't know. But I don't think you can set policy for tracking inventory for the city. That is done by the purchasing agent. You are a department, this equipment is yours,
Mhm.
and it's your responsibility to track it. When we're giving 90 different neighborhood councils $50,000, they can buy a lot of stuff. And frankly, the equipment that they buy, it could be furniture, if it's a furniture, you track it no matter what, right?
Yes,
Or if it's less than 1,000, it's not tracked.
right. On the inventory form.
wait a minute. So a desk that is less than $1,000 is or is not tracked?
It is not tracked.
Why? It's big enough. It's got to be someplace. I mean, I don't understand. It seems to me that you may be out of compliance with city rules. I think, actually, I think we need to have somebody else take a look at this, because this is, I could be wrong, but
The controller did conduct an audit.
yeah, I'm not concerned about the controller. It's the purchasing agent that has the rules. And maybe the controller missed it. But the question is, if your policies are different than other departments, and what the level of responsibility for you to track equipment purchased by your department is. The neighborhood councils are part of your department, therefore, you're responsible to track this equipment. And I know that the city tracks desks of less than $1,000. So I don't know why you would have a different standard.
Right.
So I'm not accepting this report. And I would ask that we do take action on this, but ask that the, what was the purchasing agent is under the CAO or General Services or, huh? GSD, right? I would ask that we have send a committee letter to the purchasing, to General Services, and ask them to review your policies to ensure that they are consistent with the general city practices, because I think we need to track this stuff. Okay, we have one public comment card. Lisa Baca?
I can't reach.
You're over here.
Okay.
That's the moat
Could you-
right there.
I know.
That's the moat.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm giving you, I'm sorry I didn't have time to make copies. I'm giving you a copy of my comments with some background information. I'm here, my name is Lisa Baca. I am with the Greater Echo Park Elysian Neighborhood Council. I'm the elected Chief Information Officer. And I'd like to speak on Agenda 1 and 2 combined in my comments, because they both affect the role of our treasurer.
One has been disposed.
No, I know, but they're both sort of workflow for our treasurer that you guys are going to post on the NC, the grant, and the tracking of the equipment that we purchase through credit card or demand warrants.
Okay, I'm going to defer to the city attorney on this, but you're treading on,
Okay.
the item has passed. I don't know. how we
Okay,
can-
well, I'll deal with
You can certainly-
agenda item number 2.
You can certainly make a
That's
comment
appropriate.
regarding-
That's fine.
Yeah.
Currently, in the document I gave you was a handout of what was passed out at the Dunn grant funding. It shows that there's 42 NCs that are 2 quarters behind in their filing with Dunn. Our neighborhood council has developed for our treasurer for tracking all the information that Dunn requires is sort of like a treasurer team approach, which we have found to be very successful. And as this committee goes forward in trying to create more accountability with the neighborhood councils, it adds more work to our treasurer, who's the ultimate final say in being responsible for all the taxpayer dollars that are sent. Our team has come up with an issue in dealing with the Dunn funding staff, and it will impact both how you implement these new programs that we're supposed to be monitoring, and it's how we communicate with each other. And I'm here on behalf of the neighborhood council. We're very proactive in filing our reports online and also being diligent in how we immediately respond to Dunn funding when they come in, when they send us emails. Within the hour, they get responded to. But there has to be a better way of working. There's 90 different treasurers in the system currently, and each of us get to develop our own way of working and what works for our neighborhood council. But the issue is communication with Roger Samatsu and the Dunn funding staff. He is one person receiving all communication for the neighborhood council. And
Excuse me, unless the chair wants to continue, but this is, item 2 is dealing with the inventory tracking program.
yeah, I'm okay, I'll get to that.
Okay.
When our treasurer is being asked now to log everything that comes in, either credit card or demand warrant, it is one person who works full-time. We're volunteers. We don't get paid for this. And even with 2 staff people on the board supporting our treasurer, there's just a lot of detail work that goes into processing everything that's required it done. So if we're going to be now inventorying and tracking every little thing we buy, from cans of paint to paintbrushes and art supplies for schools and pop-up
Who's
tents.
suggesting that?
Well, no, I'm saying is the inventory as what stuff that we monitor and we buy as
But that is not, that's not equipment, or, that is not,
well, our neighborhood council.
that's consumable goods.
Okay, well, we also,
not-
in the budget requests that we get, also has equipment in there along when they present their budgets to us. It's not uncommon for us to buy a piece of equipment like a camera or a computer laptop. I mean, we do get requests for that, for schools, for libraries, for the Echo Park Film Center.
And you're suggesting that not be tracked?
Well, it needs to be tracked, but we have to work in a way with done funding staff that doesn't create more of a burden for our treasurer. Ultimately, he's responsible for all the stuff that comes, the policies that we have to follow from done funding staff. And he's one person. So,
Let me ask you something, and I'm glad you stepped forward, because I needed a frame of reference here. How many items of equipment does your neighborhood council have?
in the last 6 years, I can't answer that. From June to now, since this neighborhood council's been elected, we're in the process of purchasing 2 laptop computers.
Okay, so that's 2, and I'm concerned about what is the difficulty of tracking. That's 2 items for this year. If you multiply that times 6, we're talking about 12 items.
Well, we're
Is
sort
it
of.
more than that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, from my knowledge, we're the team that just got there in July. Okay, new treasurer, pretty much new board.
Okay, do you believe that some of the items that were purchased in previous years did not accrue to the new board?
No, we know where it is. I don't know if we have everything. Like, we've used some of the pop-up tents for.
Let me ask there are items from this board that did not accrue to your current board.
Yes.
Where'd they go?
I don't know.
They disappeared.
You said you know where they are, but you just don't have them.
I don't know where they all are.
Are these items of more than $1,000 in value?
Yes.
And they weren't inventoried?
To my knowledge, no. It wasn't given to us.
I mean,
Mr. Chair, if I
this
could,
is almost criminal. Let's talk, taking an item that was purchased from the city out, if it's more than $1,000, what is grand theft? What is
Grant, oh, you're talking to a civil lawyer now. I don't remember.
I was asking Daryl. But the threshold isn't that great. And
But I could speak to the role of the treasurer for the previous board. It is a daunting task. The paperwork, I mean, just to get one check processed, it's a daunting task for any treasurer, any one person to do alone. So, I mean, I understand where you're going as far as the equipment. If it was set up from the beginning 6 years ago that way, I think it would have been a lot easier transition to this new treasurer.
no, but do people realize that it's stealing?
it's not the treasurer.
I don't think it's stealing because of the way.
I mean, the neighborhood council has a responsibility to manage this stuff, and if it's not managed right,
But there's a
if somebody keeps an item in their home after they're unelected, they're stealing.
but there's a fine line.
It's not a fine line. It's very clear. It's black and white.
Okay.
If you keep it and it's not yours, it's stealing.
Who's paying for the equipment?
But if we buy equipment for a nonprofit
File
and
a
they,
police
and-
report.
but if we buy something for a nonprofit and they keep it, is it ours or is it theirs?
Well, if that was the stated purpose and it follows all the procedures, it's theirs.
Okay.
You don't track that. We only track city equipment. I don't have a problem with anything that is donated. I mean, we have the rules for that in separate discussion. We have different opinions, but with regard to the equipment that is purchased for the neighborhood council's use, if anybody takes control of that is no longer in a position of authority to do that, they're stealing. And if we have $450,000, or I'm sorry, $4.5 million out there, and these purchases are being made by 90 different council. If we just had 2 every year from every council over 6 years, you're talking about over 1,000 items that could be stolen from the city. So if anything, I think there needs to be greater accountability. And that's going to accrue to you. That's going to benefit the neighborhood councils.
I agree with you.
So,
But it's how that accountability is overlaid on the neighborhood council.
Yeah, I understand. I understand what you're saying, and the concern, you know, it is important for us to get that kind of feedback, and I don't want to create unnecessary bureaucracy.
You can find that information out easy, though, if you wanted to know.
Which
You can have your staff go to the Dunn website and just pull everything that's over $1,000 and create a list, because it's all public information anyway.
But I'm wondering about all the stuff that's less than 1,000. You mentioned cameras and everything. If every neighborhood council bought a camera and it cost $350, you multiply that times 90, and you're talking about $27,000. I used to be an accountant, if you didn't notice, but the point is, $27,000 worth of equipment that can't be tracked? That's bogus. That is absolutely bogus and irresponsible. And I'm not pointing at you. I'm saying the department has a responsibility to find that stuff.
Well, you'd have to go back to see if they were donated to a nonprofit or if it was purchased to be reused and reused and reused, and it's just in storage. I mean,
All tracking.
but you can find that.
That's what tracking is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what tracking is. But we would have to track the. I'm not sure, Mr. Kim. You said that the controller set the guidelines at 1,000. This ad code is a little unclear. Actually, I would like to have a representative of the controller's office to participate in the discussion.
Yes, we could.
We'll continue this matter, but it says mandates that all departments to which furniture and equipment have been purchased for or assigned to by the city shall maintain a current and perpetual stock record of such furniture or equipment. Additionally, the controller shall describe the items of furniture and equipment to be contained in the records. I don't believe that was a specific direction that the controller makes decisions for each department. I thought it was a general, that the controller makes decisions for the city.
Yes.
You know, and whatever the guideline is for the police department is the same as the guideline for, in terms of tracking equipment, is the same as any other department, in this case, done.
Mhm.
I don't think they can just set thresholds for each department. That doesn't make any sense. That would really be a screwy system.
It would be a citywide standard that the controller imposes.
I believe it is a standard. I believe it is. And, you know, I took enough tests in the civil service system to believe that it is.
Mhm.
I could be wrong. Maybe things changed in the last 20 years, but I don't think so. Those are fundamental accounting principles and auditing principles and tracking inventory principles. So I'm going to continue this matter. I appreciate your comments about the complexity of the process. Those are relative to our continuing effort to find the right level. But right now, my primary concern is with setting standards that are consistent with the law. And I'm not sure that $1,000 is an acceptable level. So I would like to have a report from the controller as well as the General Services Department. Purchasing, I believe, is in charge of inventory.
Mhm.
But
We could
what was
also
that woman's
follow
name
up.
that used to do it?
General Services?
Yeah, a long time ago. Anyway,
Sylvia Conlon?
yes. Well, many years ago. I think she designed that system. But anyway, so if we could continue this matter, I do want to delve a little more into it.
Mhm.
And let's see what we come back with in 2 weeks.
Let me make a couple comments. I wrote the motion on this, and the concern is, in the neighborhood councils, there's a constant turnover
Yes.
of elected members of neighborhood council. And with the sloppy record keeping that they're keeping, and then they're gone,
Mhm.
and they buy items, whether it's $100 or $1,000 or $5,000, and the sloppy tracking system, if there is in fact a tracking system, and then as the lady mentioned, nonprofits, where a lot of this equipment is purchased for nonprofits, and who knows how the nonprofit's connected to the neighborhood council. There's so many angles where it can go sideways. So the concern I had is if they're spending taxpayers' money, we've got to have a track. If we buy something in the city, there's a tag that they put on it.
Right.
And we know who has ownership, and they do audits periodically. So
Correct.
it was in that endeavor that this constant churning of neighborhood council members through the elected process, we bring it under control. Because I think if we start looking for some of this equipment, it's long gone, and there's thousands of dollars that are missing along with it. So
Right. No, I agree with you that it is an issue, especially given the turnover of the board members, that the new incoming board members need to know exactly what their assets are because it is public property.
I'll bet you we bought more than 90 cameras.
Probably about 300.
How much you want to bet?
I'll bet you.
We'll look into it.
I'll bet you.
I-
Every neighborhood council and several iterations of neighborhood councils have probably bought cameras.
If we were to do an audit on how many laptop computers were purchased and how many we can currently track, it'd be interesting to see how many are still around and how many have walked away. So that was.
Well, I think there is a need to tighten the inventory tracking
Did
system.
the controller do an audit?
Yes,
Okay.
But did they
about
go-
a year and a half ago.
Did they go out to the different neighborhood councils, or how'd they do that audit? You know how in-depth it was?
I don't think they went out to the neighborhood councils. It was before I came in, but I don't believe that they went on site to each of the neighborhood councils. They mainly relied on the centralized records of the department.
I mean, I would think also, I mean, besides, obviously the department being ultimately responsible, it seems to me you ought to tie this to the individual neighborhood councils in terms of renewing their funding agreements. I mean, I would put that as a huge part of whether or not you get your next 50,000.
Right.
Or however we're doing it, I think before you, give them more
Yeah.
money, I think they have to have the accountability. We got to put the accountability back to the neighborhood council, not just the department.
So one way we could do it is we could go back through their past transactions and say, according to our records, these are all the purchases that you have. Could you please confirm whether you're still in possession of that? And depending on the returns, then we could hold them accountable in terms of renewing their
That's what
funding.
I would do. I mean, it's still got to be about neighborhood councils taking ownership, having the accountability more than just the department.
Right.
I know that's how we do it citywide with other departments, but this one is, about neighborhood empowerment. And, I mean, I think it's a good lesson in being empowered is making sure you're accountable
Right.
for the purchases you've made. And it's it's a good exercise for, the next board to take a good look at where they are, what they've purchased. And I think that's a part of, the disclosure and the transparency that I think taxpayers, appreciate before we give them more money to spend. I mean, I think that's, I wouldn't be comfortable with this procedure if it doesn't get back to the neighborhood councils and holding them accountable before they're given more money.
I agree with that approach.
I'm much more concerned than that. I believe that we have an amazing gap in terms of our ability to track the money that is spent. And we have a responsibility to the taxpayers to close that gap. $1,000 threshold. If every neighborhood council spent just $1,000 a year, and this is per purchase. So if every neighborhood council spent just $1,000 per year,
Right.
and we didn't have to track it, that is over 6 years. 90 times 1,000 is 90,000 times 6 is over $500,000. I don't think that's excusable. I mean, I just don't think that's excusable. It's fundamental responsibility to protect the taxpayers' money, and this isn't even the beginning of protection.
No, I agree with you. When I came into the department, I was troubled by how loose the funding program had been administered, and I've been focused on building in more accountability with how public funds are being spent.
Well, I don't think you're hearing me. I believe this is stealing if we find that somebody is keeping this stuff. And I believe that it's actionable. And the department ought to go get it if you have to use the police department to do it.
Well, we've worked with the PD in the past with some neighborhood councils who've abused public funds.
Well,
We don't publish that enough, by the way.
The sad thing is that we're
We
creating
publish
the
it.
opportunity.
If we publish that more, maybe we'll have fewer problems.
Anyway, so I would like to get, and if I could get some kind of report back
Yeah.
about how many purchases have been made that less than $1,000 and what they are.
Yeah, how do they? when
You
they-
have purchase orders. I mean, they can't just, when they buy on their credit card, you get the bill, right?
Yes.
So you have that. I want some kind of report
Uh-huh.
on what they're buying and how much of it they're buying.
Right.
So-
I just want to understand the instructions. It's to track purchases under $1,000.
We have well, the whole item includes all purchases, but what I'm focused on here is why we're not tracking things of less than $1,000 in value. We heard testimony about concerns about how the department is tracking this stuff with regard to above 1,000. But my focus right now is on less than 1,000, because I think I just think there's far too much abuse that we encounter by having such a vague policy.
But you just want done to track equipment purchases, not their donuts or their food purchases, is that
Oh, right.
correct?
No,
Yeah,
no,
I just,
no.
Equipment.
Not expendables.
Now, the other question
Yeah.
about
I don't know,
nonprofits,
check
if
down.
they're,
The things that are typically, well,
Where are they now?
the things that would be under the city's regular inventory program.
What I want to know.
what if
I
it goes to a nonprofit? Do we track that?
No, because
How do we verify it went to a nonprofit?
if it's donated to a nonprofit.
Yeah, that would be a
Is
donation.
there documentation
It should be-
from the nonprofit that they received this?
There
For
should
example,
be.
someone gets a color television set, a 52-inch plasma TV set to such and such charity. Is there some documentation that the charity gives?
52-inch?
52-inch, a big one.
That's gonna be more than 1,000.
That
Well, yeah.
that will be.
But no, but it's to a charity, though. It's to a nonprofit. Is there some report back or some document from the nonprofit that this was given to them? Or is it not connected?
No, there should be documentation that they received it.
And that needs to be part of the file. Because I know of some neighborhood councils that had made those large purchases for raffle prices. I think Dunn said you can't do that.
Right.
When you talk
We
about
didn't allow that
nonprofits,
one.
If you're doing nonprofits and there's no documentation to say it went to a nonprofit, you could make up a nonprofit and it actually went to someone other than a nonprofit. In other words, got to be a tracking system.
Right.
So if they give it to the Goodwill, where's the correspondence with Goodwill that they received this? Whatever nonprofit there is. Now, I don't have any problem giving it away to a nonprofit, but there's got to be some connection, verification.
Well, with the implementation of the grant program, that documentation will be in place. But prior to this ordinance, then neighborhood councils couldn't make grants or donations.
But they did.
Right. They weren't supposed to.
Well, if we look
But
at
it's a little
the-
unclear. I don't think, did we have specific prohibitions from them doing that?
Yes.
We did?
But the lady testified that they gave items to nonprofits. And I'm sure many of them did. And how did they get
Yeah.
away with that when it's a policy not to?
They can procure services
No, they're talking
from
about
entities.
equipment.
Right.
Equipment.
No, they shouldn't have done that.
Well, but the credit cards have a bill that itemizes the purchase.
Yes, they do.
So you should be able to track that stuff.
Right.
And honestly, it may be laborious and ominous initially, but it's gonna be well worth it in the long run.
Just give us some time to
Investment of
produce
time,
the data.
energy is gonna pay off huge dividends
Mhm.
in your budget. Because once we find the slippage, we're gonna take it from someplace.
Mhm.
That's my attitude. Right now, we give neighborhood councils 4.5 million, but Dunn gets 3.5. That's not a very good administrative cost. I
Mhm.
mean, when compared to everything else.
Mhm.
So, and then if we're losing the money, I mean, it's even less. So, I'm not happy about the inventory stuff. So if we could have everybody come back next, my staff will work with the various departments that we may ask to come testify for that.
Okay.
Thank you. Item number 3?
Item number 3 is the Library Department report in response to motion Weezer Reyes relative to Library Department's English language instructional materials program and services.
Hello,
Hi.
how are you?
Good.
Good. I'm Pat Kiefer with the Library Department, and here to talk about our programs. As you know, all of our children's librarians visit the schools every year. The librarians from the Children's Services and Young Adult Services, they go to the classes to talk about the books, to talk about the programming, to get kids charged up about reading and coming into the library. This year, we've done a couple of different things with our programs. One of them is in conjunction with LAUSD. We had a program with the middle school instructional and media center coordinators from the middle schools and high schools. We brought them in, showed them the resources that we have and the materials, databases, et cetera, and got them really charged up about the library. Children's Services also did a similar program, I believe, last spring. So we've been working with LAUSD in that regard. We've taken on a couple of new young adult programs. Basically, the first one is called Live Homework Help. This is through a company called Tutor.com, where we provide tutors to help students with their homework, grades K to 12, during the hours of 3 and 10 p.m. It's been a very well-used program, very good comments from the students using the program. And also, I'm sorry, Georgette Todd, who's our young adult coordinator, is not here today, but she also implemented something called the gang reduction program called Let's Talk TLK in the libraries, where they can get some peer counseling and talk to former gang members about the pitfalls of joining the gangs and encourage the students to stay in schools. So we've got that. Then we also have our adult literacy program. I have Toria Aiken here who can talk about that if you are interested. And with that, I turn it back to you.
This discussion, we had this item before us, and there's just numerous programs that affect literacy. But when I look at, it says planning for the future, and then Los Angeles Public Library Strategic Plan, 2007-2010. It says its mission of providing free and easy access to information, ideas, books, and technology that enrich and empower every individual in our city's diverse communities. What concerns me here is that we have a high rate of illiteracy in our city, and this is sort of a passive approach. In other words, we have this stuff. If you come and get it, you'll do better. But I'm concerned about what is the strategic objective? Is it so? When I asked my staff to interpret the strategic objective from this report, they said to create more programs, but not to reduce illiteracy.
The problem is going to be that our staff, our library staff, is not trained teachers. They are not trained to bring down the literacy program. Our mission is to provide the materials that will help address the literacy problem, to have the books, to have the multimedia, to make our meeting rooms available, to have the programming. But it is not to physically go in there and try to talk with the students and address the literacy.
And what are all these programs doing?
Hopefully they're getting the problem is they're getting the kids that are already interested in libraries and interested in reading, keeping them engaged in the process. They are not going out to the people that are not.
Okay, it seems to me, I am a teacher, and it seems to me that your folks are teaching. They may not be teachers, but they're definitely teaching. They may not doing the full gamut of things that a teacher does, but when they are reading to kids, they are teaching.
That's true.
And so I don't buy that. And I'm still, it seems to me that our library department ought to be driving the process of literacy. It's absolutely part of our strategic plan to increase our workers' capability. fundamental to addressing that concern. The strategic plan of the city of Los Angeles, and particularly this mayor, is to create a high-tech society, a highly educated society. And we can't do it if we're not participating in reducing the illiteracy in our community. The libraries are situated throughout the city. And it seems to me that we are strategically positioned geographically to affect reductions in illiteracy. It seems to me also that it is much more to our benefit to educate one child who would otherwise not learn how to read than to have somebody read Shakespeare necessarily.
And that
Because
is what our
once somebody
staff
gets to the point of
does.
reading Shakespeare, they're literate. They're going to be fine. The ones who are illiterate, though, will be the least productive in our society. And it just seems to me that our strategic objective should not be just to create programs, but in fact to effect a reduction in illiteracy. And that's not part of our objective.
Hi, I'm Eileen Abramson. I'm Director of Children's Services for the library. And in the children's area, we do that. I was on the mayor's advisory board, and he really impressed upon me this need to go out and do something. So we have programs that not only help the children but help the parents, because we
So
really
you have reduced literacy?
we have
Or
addressed
reduced illiteracy, I'm sorry.
we have addressed the literacy
No,
problem.
I'm not saying that.
Well, what
I'm not
we
saying
do.
that. I'm saying reduce illiteracy.
What we do is we bring in the parents with the children, and we try to teach them the
No,
skills.
No, you're dancing around the issue.
Mm.
Do you have a strategic plan to reduce illiteracy as a proportion in the city?
No.
No.
What would it take to get that?
We don't. What would it take to do?
I don't know.
Because our mission is to make sure that the children and the parents,
So obviously, one thing you need to do that would be to change your mission.
right.
How do you do that?
You have to come up with the programs and the capabilities on behalf of your staff to do that.
Okay. Okay, it's time to get to city council. I don't want to browbeat you. You do wonderful things. I love the library system. As a teacher, if I didn't have that in Pacoima, I don't know what I would have done with my kids. And I was the reading teacher. But that might also indicate to you my passion. It seems to me that the library department is in a key position to affect substantive improvement in terms of our children's ability to read, but they have to do a lot more than they're doing now. So number one, it seems to me that we have to develop a strategic plan to reduce literacy in the city. Part of that would include expanding services directly with the library, and part of it would include putting pressure on the school system to do a better job. But one of the things that we need is to do an assessment of where the illiteracy is, so that we're not just creating a bunch of programs that aren't really having change. We're just kind of covering our butts by doing a bunch of programming and saying, oh, well, that's fine if they don't use it, it's not our fault. When in fact, it is in the library's interest to create more readers. I mean, does that sound funny?
Absolutely.
I mean, does that sound counterintuitive to you that the library system would not promote the reduction of illiteracy as part of its fundamental mission? Because you're all about getting people to read. So it seems to me it just doesn't make any sense.
We work really closely with the schools and with the teachers.
I understand that.
In the hopes
and
that
they
they're
they
teaching.
have primary responsibility here.
Right.
But what can we do to embellish that? We can't do that if it's not part of our strategic plan. And I don't just assume that throwing a program at somebody is in fact reducing literacy or illiteracy. So
Well, you know what, we'll get.
I just want to give you some insight, because we're not going to be able to cover this item completely here. But it will be coming.
Sure.
I will be introducing motions to affect substantive change in the department, to make you much more proactive on the issue of reducing illiteracy in our city, as opposed to simply providing a bunch of programs.
Okay, we'll look forward to
And
it.
that doesn't, again, I don't want to take away from anything that you do in terms of the quality of the work that you do. I'm just saying that I don't think we have a strategic mission identified to reduce literacy, and I think we can do so much. Community by community. Have Sun Valley Library compete with City Terrace, and City Terrace compete with Westwood in terms of reducing literacy as a goal. I really think we can do something. Okay, so
We'll look at.
we're going to continue this matter, and I've asked for several meetings with the library. This is the fourth time we've tried to do this, and this is the first time you've come. So first of all, thank you. And secondly, we've tried to have several meetings, and they're just not happening. So if I have to introduce a motion to have a meeting with library staff, I will.
No, you don't need to do that.
I hope we don't have
We'll
to.
take care of it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
This meeting, public comment? No, we're good. Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Really?
What?